Look around the room the next time you're surrounded by people. Within minutes, you'll notice something fascinating. There will always be one person whose opinion carries more weight than everyone else's. When they speak, people stop talking. When they enter, others naturally make space. When they remain silent, their silence somehow says more than another person's endless words. Now ask yourself, what gives them that kind of influence? Is it money? Sometimes. Or is it status? Occasionally. Is it physical strength? Rarely. The truth is much deeper. Respect is psychological before it is social. It begins in the mind long before it's recognized by the people around you. Robert Greene has written extensively about power, influence, and human nature. One theme appears again and again throughout his work. People constantly observe one another, searching for signals of strength, competence, emotional stability, and self-control. Whether they realize it or not, they make these judgments within seconds. The surprising part? Most people unknowingly send signals that reduce the respect others feel for them, not because they're incapable, but because they communicate uncertainty without realizing it. Think about how many people apologize for existing. They begin every sentence with, "Sorry, but I know this might sound stupid. I'm probably wrong." Before they've even shared an idea, they've already invited people to doubt them. Words matter, but the beliefs behind those words matter even more. Every conversation communicates one invisible message. This is how I expect to be treated. If you constantly seek permission, people assume you need it. If you constantly chase approval, people assume your confidence depends on them. If you constantly explain yourself, people begin believing you have something to justify. Robert Greene often points out that power belongs to those who understand human behavior instead of reacting emotionally to it. The average person desperately wants to be liked. The wise person focuses first on becoming respectable. Those are not the same thing. Someone can like you without respecting you, but it's very difficult to genuinely respect someone who doesn't respect themselves. This is where everything begins. Self-respect. Imagine walking into an interview. One candidate enters nervously, avoids eye contact, speaks rapidly, constantly apologizes. The other candidate walks in calmly, listens carefully, answers directly, doesn't rush to fill every silence. Who seems more trustworthy? Usually the second. Not because they're smarter, but because calmness signals confidence. And confidence, when combined with humility, naturally earns respect. Notice something else. The people who command respect rarely try to prove how important they are. They don't interrupt everyone. They don't boast about every achievement. They don't compete for attention in every conversation. Ironically, the less they chase validation, the more valuable they appear. Why? Because scarcity creates value. Robert Greene repeatedly explains that what is constantly available often becomes overlooked. The same principle applies to attention. If you're constantly talking, people stop listening. If you're constantly explaining, people stop wondering. If you're constantly trying to impress, people start looking for flaws. Real influence comes from restraint. Think of a chess master. They don't move every piece at once. Every move is deliberate. Every pause has purpose. Every action serves a larger strategy. Life works the same way. The strongest people aren't always the loudest. Very often, they're the quietest observers. Before speaking, they study the room. Before reacting, they understand the situation. Before making a decision, they control their emotions. This is emotional discipline. And emotional discipline is one of the clearest signals of strength. Imagine someone insults you in front of others. One person immediately becomes angry, raises their voice, defends themselves endlessly. Another person remains composed, answers briefly, or simply smiles and moves on. Which person appears stronger? Usually the one who stayed calm, not because they ignored the situation, but because they refused to let someone else control their emotions. That's one of the deepest lessons found throughout Robert Greene's work. The person who controls their emotions is far more difficult to manipulate, and people naturally respect individuals they cannot easily control. Over the next few parts, we're going to explore 7 psychological principles that consistently increase respect, not through manipulation or deception, but through self-control, awareness, and intentional behavior. These aren't magic tricks, they're habits. ways of thinking, ways of communicating, ways of carrying yourself that quietly change how others perceive you. But before learning any of them, you must remember one thing: never chase respect. Become the kind of person who naturally deserves it. Because respect that is demanded rarely lasts. Respect that is earned becomes part of your identity. So ask yourself, when people leave a conversation with you, what do they remember? Your insecurity, your need for approval, or your quiet confidence? The answer to that question will determine how much influence you have, not only over others, but over your own life. And that brings us to the first psychological principle, one that almost everyone overlooks, but that instantly changes how people perceive you. There is something strangely powerful about a person who doesn't feel the need to speak all the time. Think about the last meeting you attended. There was probably one person who talked nonstop. They interrupted others, explained every opinion, reacted to every comment, and somehow, despite saying the most, they left the smallest impression. Then there was someone else, someone who spoke only a few times, but every sentence carried weight. When they finally shared an idea, everyone listened. Why? Because value is often connected to restraint. Robert Greene repeatedly explores this principle. Throughout his work, he notes that people reveal themselves through unnecessary words, while those who exercise patience often gain a strategic advantage. Silence is not weakness. Used intentionally, it becomes a form of quiet confidence. Most people misunderstand silence. They assume being quiet means having nothing to offer. In reality, the opposite is often true. People who are comfortable with silence usually don't feel pressured to prove themselves. They trust that their actions, judgment, and character will speak louder than constant conversation. Imagine two people walking into the same room. The first immediately begins talking. They're eager to be noticed. They laugh at every joke. They offer opinions on every subject. They constantly search for opportunities to insert themselves into the conversation. The second person enters differently. They greet people respectfully. They observe the atmosphere. They pay attention to body language. They notice who is leading the discussion and who is simply trying to dominate it. Only after understanding the room do they begin to speak. Who has more information? The observer. And in any social situation, information is influence. This doesn't mean you should become distant or cold. It means you should become intentional. Instead of speaking to fill silence, speak to create value. Before saying something, ask yourself, does this add clarity? Does this help? Does this move the conversation forward? If the answer is no, silence is often the stronger choice. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they must constantly entertain others to earn respect. They fear awkward pauses, they fear being overlooked, so they keep talking. Ironically, the more they chase attention, the less memorable they become. Think about nature for a moment. A river that flows calmly appears powerful. A puddle splashes loudly with very little force. Real strength rarely needs to announce itself. The same principle applies to people. Confidence doesn't rush to be heard. It waits until something meaningful needs to be said. Robert Greene frequently reminds readers that emotional control is a form of power. Speaking less gives you something incredibly valuable: time. Time to think, time to observe, time to avoid emotional reactions you'll later regret. Imagine someone criticizes you during a discussion. Most people react immediately. They defend themselves, raise their voice, explain every detail. But a composed person pauses. They breathe, they think, then they respond. Not emotionally, but intentionally. That pause changes everything, because the person who controls the pace of the conversation often controls the conversation itself. Now let's move to the second psychological principle. Trick second, never seek approval. This habit quietly destroys respect more than almost anything else. Many people spend their entire lives trying to make everyone happy. They change their opinions depending on who's listening. They apologize for things that don't require an apology. They constantly ask, "Is this okay? What do you think? Do you approve?" Without realizing it, they're teaching people something dangerous. They're teaching others that their confidence depends on external validation. Robert Greene often points out that people naturally respect individuals who have a clear internal standard. That doesn't mean becoming arrogant or refusing feedback. It means knowing your values well enough that your identity isn't rebuilt every time someone disagrees with you. Think about the people you admire. Are they constantly asking for permission to exist? Or probably not. They listen, they learn, but they don't abandon themselves just because someone disapproves. Imagine a sculptor creating a masterpiece. If every passerby demanded changes, the sculpture would never be finished. The artist must listen to useful advice while remaining faithful to the vision. Your life works the same way. Constructive feedback helps you grow. Constant approval seeking prevents growth. Here's something important to understand. People often trust those who trust themselves. When you constantly second-guess every decision, others begin to question your judgment too. But when you're thoughtful, prepared, and willing to stand behind your decisions, even while remaining open to learning, you project stability. And stability earns respect. Consider two employees presenting the same idea. The first says, "This probably won't work, but maybe we could try it." The second says, "I've considered several options. Here's the approach I believe gives us the best chance of success." And neither person claims certainty, but one communicates confidence, the other communicates doubt. Words matter because they reveal mindset. Another hidden form of approval seeking is over-explaining. Have you ever noticed how some people justify every decision they make? They explain why they bought something, why they changed jobs, why they said no, why they spent time alone, why they chose a different path. Not because anyone asked, but because they fear being misunderstood. Robert Greene warns that revealing too much often weakens your position, not because honesty is wrong, but because unnecessary explanation suggests you're asking others to approve choices that are already yours to make. You don't need to defend every decision. If your actions align with your principles, let them stand. Of course, this doesn't mean becoming stubborn. Wise people welcome evidence. They admit mistakes. They adjust when new information appears. Confidence is not refusing to change. Confidence is changing for the right reasons, not because you're desperate to please everyone. Here's a challenge. For one day, notice how often you seek approval without realizing it. Do you apologize before speaking? Do you hesitate to express your opinion? Do you immediately change your view when someone disagrees? Do you explain yourself long after your point has already been understood? Awareness is the first step toward change. Start replacing approval seeking with quiet confidence. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry if this sounds stupid," say, "Here's my perspective." Instead of saying, "I don't know if this is right," say, "Based on what I've learned, here's my conclusion." The difference may seem small, but over time, those small shifts reshape how others perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Remember, the goal isn't to dominate conversations. The goal isn't to appear mysterious, and it certainly isn't to manipulate people. The goal is to become someone whose words carry weight because they come from careful thought, emotional discipline, and genuine self-respect. When you speak less, people listen more carefully. When you stop chasing approval, people begin to see you as someone guided by principles rather than pressure. These aren't tricks in the sense of deception. They're habits of mature, emotionally grounded people. And the remarkable thing is this: you don't need more charisma to earn respect. You don't need a louder voice. You don't need a higher position. You simply need greater control over your attention, your emotions, and your need for validation. Because the people who command the most respect are rarely the ones trying hardest to impress others. They're the ones who have learned to master themselves first. There is a moment in every person's life when they're tested, not by opportunity, but by pressure. Or someone insults them. A coworker takes credit for their work. A friend betrays their trust. A stranger questions their ability. In those moments, something important happens. People stop listening to your words. They begin watching your reaction. And often, your reaction tells them far more about you than anything you've ever said. Robert Greene repeatedly emphasizes that emotional self-control is one of the greatest forms of power. The person who cannot control their emotions can be controlled by almost anyone. Think about that for a moment. If someone can make you angry whenever they choose, who really has the power? If a single negative comment ruins your entire day, who is controlling your emotions? Most people believe strength means reacting quickly, but genuine strength often looks very different. It looks like patience. It looks like composure. It looks like refusing to let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. Imagine two leaders facing the same crisis. The first panics, they raise their voice, they blame everyone around them. They make rush decisions. Soon their entire team begins to panic as well. Now imagine the second leader. The situation is just as serious, but instead of reacting emotionally, they pause. They gather information. They ask questions. They remain calm. Their calmness spreads throughout the room. Nothing about the problem has changed, but everything about the outcome has. People naturally trust those who remain steady during uncertainty. This is the foundation of psychological trick #3, master your emotions before you try to influence others. Notice that this doesn't mean suppressing your emotions, it means understanding them. Anger isn't your enemy, fear isn't your enemy. Frustration isn't your enemy. The real danger is allowing those emotions to become your decision makers. Robert Greene often writes that understanding yourself is the first step toward understanding other people. If you don't recognize your emotional triggers, someone else eventually will. And once they do, they can predict your behavior. That's why emotionally disciplined people are difficult to manipulate. Imagine someone intentionally tries to provoke you. Maybe they criticize your work. Maybe they question your intelligence. Maybe they insult you in front of others. The average person immediately reacts. They interrupt. They defend themselves. They try to win the argument. But someone with emotional discipline asks a different question. Why is this person trying to provoke me? That single question changes everything. Instead of becoming part of the conflict, they begin observing it. Observation creates distance. Distance creates clarity, and clarity produces better decisions. Think about a chess grandmaster. They don't move pieces because they're emotional. Every move is calculated. Every decision serves a larger purpose. Life rewards the same mindset before responding to criticism. Pause. Before reacting to bad news, pause. Before making an important decision while angry, pause. That brief pause may only last a few seconds, but it can save you from mistakes that last for years. Now consider another situation. Someone compliments you. Most people enjoy it. Nothing wrong with that. But emotionally mature people don't become addicted to praise either. Why? Because if criticism controls your emotions and praise controls your emotions, you're still allowing other people to control your emotional state. Real confidence remains balanced. It accepts appreciation. It learns from criticism. But it doesn't depend on either. That's emotional independence. And emotional independence naturally earns respect. Now let's move to psychological trick 4th. Set boundaries without feeling guilty. Many people confuse kindness with endless availability. They believe saying yes makes them a good person, so they agree to everything. They sacrifice their own priorities. They ignore their own needs. They allow people to cross lines they never should have crossed. Then they wonder why they feel exhausted, resentful, and overlooked. Here's the truth. Every time you fail to set a healthy boundary, you quietly teach people how little you value your own time. Robert Greene often highlights that people observe what you tolerate. If you tolerate disrespect repeatedly, some people begin believing disrespect is acceptable, not because they're cruel, but because you've unintentionally normalized it. Imagine lending money to someone who never pays you back. The first time, you stay quiet. The second time, you stay quiet again. Eventually, the problem isn't only their behavior, it's the message your silence has been sending. Boundaries aren't about controlling other people. They're about communicating your standards. Think about a well-built house. A fence doesn't exist because the owner hates the neighbors. It exists because healthy relationships require clear limits. The same is true in life. Boundaries protect respect. Without them, resentment quietly grows. Many people fear disappointing others, so they say yes when they mean no. They attend events they don't want to attend, accept responsibilities they don't have time for, answer messages immediately, even when they're exhausted. Eventually, they become available to everyone except themselves. And here's the irony. People often respect those who respectfully protect their time far more than those who sacrifice it endlessly. Why? Because boundaries communicate self-respect. Notice the difference between arrogance and boundaries. Arrogance says, "My needs matter more than yours." Healthy boundaries say, my needs matter too. Those are completely different attitudes. One comes from ego, the other comes from balance. Imagine your schedule is already full. A friend asks you to take on another commitment. You have two choices. The first is dishonest. Maybe. I'll try. I'll see. Even though you already know the answer is no. The second is respectful. I appreciate you asking, but I can't commit to that right now. Short, clear, kind. No unnecessary apology, no long explanation, no guilt. Robert Greene repeatedly points out that uncertainty invites manipulation. Clarity earns respect. People may not always like your boundaries, but they usually understand them, and those who genuinely value you will respect them. Remember this, every yes is also a no to something else. When you say yes to unnecessary obligations, you may be saying no to your health, your family, your goals, your peace of mind. That's why emotionally mature people don't measure kindness by how much they sacrifice. They measure it by whether they can help without abandoning themselves. Here's your challenge for today. The next time you're about to react emotionally, pause. Take one slow breath. Ask yourself, what response will I respect tomorrow? Then choose that response. And the next time someone asks for something you genuinely cannot give, practice saying no with kindness, not with guilt, not with anger, just honesty. Because respect begins with the standards you set for yourself. When you master your emotions, people stop seeing you as unpredictable. When you establish healthy boundaries, people stop seeing you as someone who can be taken for granted. Together, these two habits quietly transform the way others perceive you. Not because you become louder, not because you become more intimidating, but because you become more grounded. And people naturally respect those who remain steady when everyone else is reacting. Have you ever wondered why some people seem impossible to manipulate? People hesitate before underestimating them. They don't reveal every plan, they don't react to every opinion, they don't make dramatic promises. Yet somehow they earn deep respect wherever they go. Why? Because they're predictable in their values, but unpredictable in their moves. Robert Greene often explores the importance of strategy and restraint. One recurring theme is that revealing everything about yourself makes you easier to read, while thoughtful discretion creates room for curiosity and respect. This doesn't mean deceiving people or playing games. It means understanding that you don't have to broadcast every intention, every emotion, or every next step. Think about a game of chess. Imagine a player who announces every move before making it. I'll move my knight here. Then I'll attack your queen. After that, I'll checkmate you. Would they have any strategic advantage? Of course not. Their opponent would always be prepared. Life works in a surprisingly similar way. Many people announce goals long before they've taken meaningful action. They tell everyone about the business they're starting, the book they're writing, the fitness journey they're beginning, the skills they're going to master. Then something happens. The excitement of talking about the goal begins to replace the discipline of actually pursuing it. Robert Greene repeatedly reminds readers that action carries far more weight than declarations. Quiet progress often creates stronger results than loud intentions. Imagine two entrepreneurs. The first posts every day about becoming successful. Every new idea becomes a public announcement. Every small milestone becomes a celebration. The second entrepreneur says very little. They spend their time learning, building, testing, improving. Months later, one person has hundreds of motivational posts. The other has a thriving business. Which one earns more respect? Usually the one whose results speak before their words. That's because people naturally trust evidence more than promises. One of the fastest ways to lose credibility is by constantly talking about what you're going to do without following through. Every unfinished promise weakens your reputation. Every completed action strengthens it. That's why the first lesson of this psychological principle is simple. Speak less about your plans, work more on your execution. Let success introduce itself. Robert Greene often describes power as something that grows quietly before it becomes visible. A seed doesn't announce that it's becoming a tree. It simply grows, day after day, root after root, until one day everyone notices its strength. Your goals deserve the same patience. Protect them while they're growing. Now let's look at another side of unpredictability. Most people become easy to manipulate because their emotional reactions are completely predictable. Compliment them, they become attached. Criticize them, they become defensive. Ignore them, they become desperate for attention. Praise them, they immediately trust you. If someone can predict your emotional response every single time, they can often influence your behavior. That's why emotional consistency is so valuable. Imagine someone trying to provoke you. Instead of reacting immediately, you remain calm. You ask questions instead of making accusations. You seek understanding before judgment. Suddenly, the other person loses control of the situation, not because you've become aggressive, but because you've become emotionally stable. Robert Greene consistently points out that people who cannot be easily manipulated often gain quiet authority. Their calmness becomes their strength. Now let's explore something equally important. Being unpredictable should never mean being unreliable. These are two completely different things. Some people mistake inconsistency for mystery. They cancel plans without notice. They disappear when responsibilities become difficult. They constantly change their opinions. They call this freedom. In reality, it destroys trust. Respect cannot exist without reliability. Think about a bridge. People don't admire a bridge because it looks impressive. They trust it because it supports them every single time they cross it. Your character should work the same way. People should never have to wonder whether you'll keep your word, whether you'll arrive on time, whether you'll finish what you started, whether you'll take responsibility when things become difficult. Reliability creates security, and security creates respect. Imagine two coworkers. One is exciting, full of ideas, always talking about big dreams, but they rarely finish anything. The other speaks less, makes fewer promises, but every commitment is completed exactly as promised. Who becomes the trusted leader? Usually the second, because reliability always outlasts excitement. Robert Greene reminds us that reputation is built slowly but damaged quickly. Every action contributes to the story people tell themselves about who you are. Ask yourself, what story are your actions telling? Are they saying, this person is dependable? Or, this person talks more than they deliver? Here's another hidden principle. People respect those who don't constantly seek attention for their achievements. Imagine helping someone, then immediately telling everyone about it. Was the goal to help or to be admired? Now imagine helping quietly, expecting nothing in return. Months later, your reputation grows not because you advertised it, but because your character became visible through consistent behavior. That's the difference between influence and performance. One is built on substance, the other is built on appearance. Robert Greene often highlights that appearances matter, but appearances without substance eventually collapse. Real confidence doesn't need constant recognition. It trusts that consistent excellence will eventually become impossible to ignore. There's another mistake many people make. They confuse being mysterious with being emotionally unavailable. You don't have to become cold. You don't have to hide your personality. You don't have to distance yourself from everyone. Instead, become intentional. Share thoughtfully. Listen carefully. Protect your private goals until they've developed enough strength to stand on their own. Not every dream needs an audience. Not every plan needs approval. Sometimes the greatest progress happens in silence. Here's a practical challenge. For the next week, before announcing a new goal, ask yourself, would I rather talk about this or complete it? Then choose action. The next time someone tries to provoke an emotional reaction, pause. Respond with calm curiosity instead of instant emotion. And every time you make a commitment, treat it as a promise to your own character, because every promise you keep strengthens your reputation. Every promise you break weakens it. At the end of the day, respect isn't created by being loud. It isn't created by impressing people. It isn't created by appearing perfect. It's created when your actions consistently align with your words. When people know they can trust your character, even if they can't always predict your next move, that's real influence. That's quiet power. And that's exactly the kind of respect that lasts long after first impressions fade. By now, you've probably noticed something interesting. None of these psychological principles require manipulation. None of them ask you to pretend to be someone you're not, and none of them depend on tricks in the ordinary sense of the word. Instead, they all point toward the same destination. Become someone who naturally earns respect through character, discipline, and emotional intelligence. Robert Greene consistently explores how lasting influence is built through self-mastery rather than attention-seeking. The people who command genuine respect rarely spend their lives trying to convince others of their value. Instead, they develop habits that quietly reveal it over time. That brings us to psychological trick sixth. Trick sixth, stop explaining yourself to everyone. One of the biggest confidence killers is the habit of constantly justifying your decisions. Think about how often people explain things no one even questioned. They explain why they changed careers, why they ended a relationship, why they started a business, why they declined an invitation, why they chose to spend time alone, not because someone demanded an explanation, but because they fear being misunderstood. Here's the problem. The more you defend every decision, the more people begin to assume your confidence depends on their approval. Robert Greene frequently points out that revealing too much can weaken your position. This isn't an argument for secrecy or dishonesty. It's a reminder that not every decision requires public validation. Imagine a captain steering a ship across the ocean. Does the captain stop every few minutes to ask every passenger whether they approve of the route? Of course not. The captain listens when necessary, adjusts when new information appears, but ultimately the captain accepts responsibility for the direction of the ship. Your life deserves that same level of ownership. This doesn't mean ignoring wise advice. In fact, emotionally mature people actively seek constructive criticism. But there's a difference between learning and living for approval. Suppose someone asks, "Why didn't you attend the event?" You don't need a 5-minute speech filled with apologies. Sometimes, "I had other priorities," is enough. Suppose someone questions your career decision. Instead of becoming defensive, you can calmly say, "I believe this is the right path for me." Then move forward. Notice something important. Confidence doesn't feel the need to win every argument. It doesn't need everyone to agree. It doesn't need universal approval. Because confidence understands something that insecurity forgets. Not everyone will understand your journey, and that's okay. Many of history's greatest innovators were misunderstood long before they were respected. They didn't stop because people doubted them. They continued because their purpose was stronger than public opinion. Ask yourself honestly, how much energy have you wasted trying to make everyone understand you? Now imagine using that same energy to improve yourself instead. Which investment would produce greater results? Exactly, your time is valuable. Don't spend it explaining a future that your actions will eventually make obvious. That leads us directly into the final psychological principle. Trick seventh, let your actions build your reputation. There is an old saying, actions speak louder than words. People repeat it so often that they stop thinking about what it really means. But if you look closely, you'll realize it's one of the deepest principles of human psychology. People believe patterns, not promises. Anyone can say, "I'm honest. I'm disciplined. I'm loyal. I'm hardworking." But those words mean very little until they're supported by consistent behavior. Robert Greene often reminds readers that reputation is one of the most valuable forms of power a person can possess, and reputation isn't built in one dramatic moment. It's built one decision at a time. Imagine two business owners. The first spends every day telling customers how trustworthy they are. The second simply delivers excellent service, keeps every promise, and treats people fairly. Months later, who has the stronger reputation? Usually the one who focused on actions instead of advertising, because trust grows through experience. The same principle applies in every area of life. If you want people to respect your discipline, be disciplined. If you want people to respect your honesty, tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. If you want people to respect your leadership, take responsibility before taking credit. These behaviors create something words never can, evidence. And evidence is incredibly persuasive. Think about a lighthouse. It doesn't chase ships. It doesn't shout across the ocean. It simply stands firm, night after night, storm after storm. Its consistency becomes its reputation. Your character should work the same way. Don't chase recognition. Become consistent enough that recognition naturally follows. Here's another lesson many people overlook. Respect is often earned during difficult moments. Not easy ones. Anyone can stay positive when everything goes well. Anyone can be kind when they're comfortable. But what happens when things fall apart? Do you keep your word? Do you accept responsibility? Do you remain calm? Do you continue working after failure? Those moments define reputation far more than success ever could. Robert Greene repeatedly points out that adversity reveals character. Pressure exposes who we really are. Imagine a bridge during a storm. No one truly knows whether it's strong until it's tested. Your character is tested the same way. Challenges don't create your values, they reveal them. That's why setbacks can become opportunities, not because failure feels good, but because it allows your discipline to become visible. Another powerful habit is giving credit generously. Insecure people desperately seek recognition. Confident people understand that sharing credit doesn't reduce their value. In fact, it often increases it. People naturally respect leaders who recognize the contributions of others. Why? Because secure people don't feel threatened by someone else's success. They understand that lifting others doesn't lower them. Now ask yourself a difficult question. When people describe your character, what words would they use? Reliable, calm, honest, disciplined, or unpredictable, defensive, attention-seeking, inconsistent? The answer isn't found in what you believe about yourself. It's found in the experiences other people have with you over time. That's why daily habits matter so much. Every conversation, every promise, every challenge, every decision adds another sentence to the story your reputation tells. Fortunately, that story can always improve, starting today. Not through dramatic speeches, not through trying to impress everyone, but through quiet consistency. Because consistency is rare, and rare qualities naturally earn respect. As we prepare for the final part of this journey, remember all 7 principles we've explored. Speak less and observe more. Stop seeking approval. Master your emotions. Set healthy boundaries. Be strategically reserved, but consistently reliable. Stop over-explaining your life. Let your actions build your reputation. Individually, each habit makes a difference. Together, they create a person who doesn't have to demand respect, because respect becomes the natural response to the way they live. And in the final part, we'll bring all of these lessons together into one powerful challenge that can begin transforming your life the moment this video ends. Before this video ends, I want you to stop thinking about everyone else for just a moment. Forget the people who ignored you. Forget the people who underestimated you. Forget the people who never recognized your value. Because here's the truth. The greatest battle for respect isn't fought in the outside world. It's fought inside your own mind. Robert Greene's work consistently points toward one powerful idea: lasting influence begins with self-mastery. You cannot control what every person thinks of you, but you can control the habits, decisions, and standards that shape your character. And over time, those are the things people come to respect. Think about your life today. How many decisions have you made simply because you wanted people to like you? How many opportunities have you avoided because you feared criticism? How many dreams have you postponed because you were waiting for everyone's approval? Most people spend years trying to manage their reputation instead of building their character, but character always comes first. Reputation follows. Imagine building a house. If you spend all your money painting the walls while ignoring the foundation, the house may look beautiful for a while, but eventually it will collapse. Many people treat their lives the same way. They focus on appearance, looking successful, sounding confident, trying to impress everyone. But inside, they're filled with self-doubt. Real confidence works differently. It starts where no one else can see. It begins with keeping promises to yourself, showing up when you don't feel like it, remaining calm when others lose control, speaking honestly even when it's uncomfortable, walking away from situations that don't align with your values. These are the invisible habits that create visible respect. One of the biggest misunderstandings about respect is believing it can be demanded. It can't. You can demand attention. You can demand obedience. You can even demand silence. But you cannot demand genuine respect. Respect must be earned. And the remarkable thing is, it is earned long before anyone notices it. Every time you choose discipline over excuses, you're earning it. Every time you refuse to gossip, you're earning it. Every time you stay calm under pressure, you're earning it. Every time you keep your word, you're earning it. Those moments may seem ordinary, but they quietly reshape who you are. Robert Greene often reminds readers that power is not found in dramatic moments. It grows through repeated actions, careful observation, patience, and emotional control. That's why people who appear naturally respected usually spent years developing habits that no one else ever saw. People admire the finished sculpture. They rarely appreciate the thousands of careful strikes that shaped it. Your character is that sculpture. Every choice either strengthens it or weakens it. Now think back to the 7 principles we've explored. You learn to speak with intention instead of speaking for attention. You learn to stop chasing approval and begin trusting your own standards. You learn that emotional control creates more influence than emotional reactions. You learn that boundaries protect both your peace and your self-respect. You learn to let your actions become louder than your promises. And finally, you learn that reputation is built one decision at a time. Individually, each lesson is valuable. Together, they become a completely different way of living. Imagine practicing these habits for the next 30 days. Not perfectly, but consistently. You begin speaking less and listening more. You stop apologizing for every opinion. You respond instead of reacting. You protect your time without feeling guilty. You finish what you start. You let your work speak before your words. Would people notice? Eventually, but something even more important would happen. First, you would notice you would begin trusting yourself again. You would stop second-guessing every decision. You would become less dependent on praise, less afraid of criticism, more focused on growth than comparison. And that is the beginning of real confidence, because the strongest people in the room are rarely the loudest. They're the ones who know exactly who they are, even when nobody else is watching. There will always be people who misunderstand you. Some will underestimate you. Some will criticize you no matter what you do. If you chase every opinion, you'll lose yourself trying to satisfy people who were never going to be satisfied. Instead, become so committed to your principles that other people's approval becomes a bonus, not a necessity. Ask yourself one final question. If no one applauded your efforts, would you still become the person you want to be? If the answer is yes, you're already walking the path of genuine confidence. Because discipline doesn't need an audience. Integrity doesn't need recognition. Character doesn't depend on popularity. Those qualities exist whether anyone notices them or not, and sooner or later people do notice, not because you ask them to, but because consistency is impossible to hide forever. A tree doesn't become tall overnight. Day after day, it grows quietly. Storm after storm, its roots become deeper. Years later, people admire its strength. They forget how long it spent growing where no one was looking. Your life is no different. Don't rush your progress. Don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. Don't measure your worth by likes, compliments, or temporary opinions. Measure it by the promises you keep, the habits you build, the discipline you practice, the integrity you protect, because those are the things that create a reputation no criticism can easily destroy. So before you leave this video, make one commitment, not to me, to yourself. For the next 7 days, practice just one of these principles every single day. Speak with intention, protect your boundaries, control your emotions, keep your promises. Or choose one, then repeat it until it becomes part of your character. Because transformation doesn't happen in one extraordinary moment. It happens through ordinary decisions repeated with extraordinary consistency. One day, people will describe you as calm, confident, respected, reliable. They may think you were simply born that way, only you will know the truth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't talent. It wasn't magic. It was the result of thousands of small decisions made when no one was watching. And that is the kind of respect no one can take away. If this message challenged the way you think, don't let it end here. Put these principles into practice today. Start with one habit, stay consistent, and let your character become your strongest introduction. Thank you for watching. Remember, respect isn't something you chase. It's something you become.